Good morning. It is April 13th, 2026. This is Just Listen Live podcast for Southern Illinois residents. And my name is George Goodman. Welcome to the podcast. And as usual, I want to tell you that I will be brief and concise. And let's get to it right now. There are a couple of things that I really think that you should know about. The first one is I want to talk to you about something called a millionaire's tax. So, the Illinois, the Illinois House of Representatives introduced a bill, and what they want to do is based off of a study. So I went back and I looked at the study, and then I'll tell you specifically how the wording changed. All right, so there was a study done, potential framework for a 3% surtax on anyone making a net income of $1 million or more. Now, so the Illinois Department of Revenue looked at this, and the study found that middle class and working families pay 5% more towards state and local taxes than households of top 1% of earners. Now, they don't tell you why. I think I know why, but let me continue. So the study projects that a 3% surtax on earners make 1 million or more would generate around 3.4 billion in fiscal year 2028 and up to 5 billion for fiscal year 2033. Okay. So here we go. Now, there are three key policy suggestions as to how Illinois could use the funds. All right. So, first option is dedicated to property tax relief for homeowners, and then that would take the form of rebates ranging between $1,200 to $1,800, depending on the household. And the rebates would be provided in the annual checks to lower roughly 3 million permanent residential homeowners who meet the homestead exemption in the state. Second option would be is to fully fund all Illinois schools using the evidence-based funding model, which is currently used to fully fund schools to an adequate level by 2039. Now, that's what the study said. Let's go back and look at what the legislature said. Hold on a sec. Let me find it. All right. So, as I told you, it is a bill. Actually, it's a House Joint Resolution Constitutional Amendment 26. Sorry about that. On February 18th, aims to establish a graduated income tax structure by targeting only the state's highest earners. Now, that's already changed from the study a little bit already. That's why I read you what the study said. All right, key provisions, 3% surtax on high income. So here's where we get into the language. So get ready. An additional 3% tax will be imposed on any portion of an individual's annual income that exceeds $1 million. Now, that's important. Any portion of an individual's annual income. So, my first question, would that go, meaning would it affect your 401k if you had over $1 million in it? We don't know, and I don't know. But that there needs to be clarification on that to figure out what exactly that means. So, for example, an individual earning 1.2 million would pay the surtax only on $200,000 above the $1 million threshold. Okay, so that's their example, right? So they didn't say so far what they mean on any portion of an individual's annual income. That's where it is a little bit troublesome. Addictive to flat tax. So this surtax will be applied on top of the state's existing 4.95% flat income tax rate. If you will remember, the income tax rate is controlled by the Illinois Constitution, that there will be an income tax in the state, so that would add to it. So, also, this amendment explicitly mandates that all revenue collected from the tax will be used for property tax relief. Okay, so that's good. Funding targets. Recent studies and proponents suggest the revenue, and I don't like when they estimate stuff when you haven't got any money in, but 3.8 billion to 4.5 billion annually. Okay. Now, when they get this revenue, they're saying here, provide $1,500 rebates to approximately 3 million homeowners, fully fund public school districts, reducing their reliance on local property taxes, offset property tax bill spikes for eligible households. Okay, so that was a lot. $1,500 rebates. I'm not sure if I'm not sure how they're going to do that. That's why I'm kind of hesitating on some of it, because I'm not clear on the 3 million people that they're talking about. Will there be a certain income level that they're targeting? Because normally that's what they do. But you can do the math. 3 million, if you're giving them $1,500, that's quite a bit already. Now, fully fund the school districts, reducing their reliance on local property taxes. So the devil is in the details, and they would need more detailed accounting to what that means. So they didn't say everyone would get the rebates. So who are the people that they're talking about? They haven't identified that yet. Okay, so, as I told you, currently the Illinois Constitution requires an income tax. I personally think that we need to repeal that, because people who live in Illinois are getting taxed on everything. If you work, if you're not working, then you're not paying taxes on anything. So we need to make the taxing a little bit fairer. And then now they're going to get this millionaire's tax that suspect to who exactly is going to benefit from that. And again, it's how it's written. So when they write it certain ways, they leave out details that I think would be important. All right. So the legislative requirements: General Assembly approval. The amendment must pass both the House and Senate with 3/5 majority for the constitutional amendment. Voter referendum. If approved by lawmakers, it would appear as a binding question on the November 2026 ballot. Final passage. To be enacted, it requires approval of either 60% of those voting on the specific question, or simple majority of all voters in the election. Okay, so you know what's going to happen. When I just said the legislative requirements, you know what's going to happen. So the General Assembly has a super majority. So that means that every Democrat would have to vote for that, and they would have to have probably 5 to 7 Republican votes, and I don't think that they have that in the House or the Senate. And then it would appear as a binding question on the ballot, and they would have to socialize that to convince people that that's a good idea. And by default, they need more facts and details than they have here. and it's how it's worded so that everybody can understand what they mean. So if you look at a ballot, there's only a certain amount of room on there anyway. So, but the gist of it is that they're trying that. Now, I went and I looked to see what Republicans think of this. So, Republicans, and let me say something too, all people are not rich or have money are Republicans. It's Illinoisans that have worked their butts off. So when we characterize things under Republicans, I'm sure that some of the Democrats disagree too. But the people putting this bill forward uh, just focus on, well, the Republicans won't like it. Okay, so proposed as a 3% income tax surcharge on earnings over $1 million. That's why they don't want it. They believe it functions as a gateway to a graduated income tax that would eventually burden the middle class. Yes, and that's an important point based on the fact graduated income tax. So once that is in effect, you could tweak it and say, well, we're not getting enough money because it's only for people at $1 million. We need to take it down to 800, then 700. So that's how it can happen based on the way that it might be written. All right. So, suggest the revenue would fund property tax relief. GOP leaders argue that the state's high taxes are driven by overspending and unfunded pension obligations rather than elect revenue. Now, the GOP should stay away from unfunded pension obligations. I believe, and it's just my opinion, if you're running for office, you have to fund those pensions, because when people set those up years ago, they had the understanding that they would get their pension. So you have to stay away from that and not make that a talking point. All right. The overspending, that could be true, but we won't know that unless you do an audit, which they haven't done in the last 7 or 8 years. All right. Trust and transparency issues. Well, that's because they don't trust the Democrats for what I said earlier when they think that it could be a graduated income tax. That's why trust and transparency issues. They can dress it up any way that they want, meaning the Republicans, but that's what it means. And they use the word Democrat super majority because they are seriously outnumbered in the Illinois House. Economic impact and out migration. All right. Argue that higher taxes on top earners will drive away job creators, high wealthy individuals, worsen than the state's existing net population loss. Yes, I think that it would. Why do I think that? So, back in the 90s, when the corporate tax went from 31 to 39%, corporations left the country. That's a fact. So, if business people are trying to make a profit, to include those with small businesses, because that's one of them too, uh, if the company is worth. So that's why I said they need to define who they think the millionaires are and have a hard criteria, because when you don't, that's when there are misunderstandings and people cannot understand it. So they're not going to vote for it. And you're going to have people talking about, well, they're going to do this. All right. So the GOP says that the root cause of high property tax is not insufficient income tax revenue, but rather soaring public pension obligations and a high number of local officials. So that's what they are talking about. So that millionaire's tax, I said that first to kind of bring you into it. And they're not really getting rid of, meaning the Illinois legislature, they're not getting rid of property taxes. They're telling you that 3 million people will get back $1,500. Well, in Illinois, the average price of property that I've seen is probably $4,500. So if you take away $1,500, I'm not sure how much that actually helps or not, or if they're going to give it to you as a credit. It might be a credit where no actual money passes hands. And also, the cost of education is going up. I told you last week that they are looking at funding schools with more money because they lost money from the federal government because of immigration. So you have to evaluate if you trust what they're telling you. So that's what they're doing on that. So I'll talk about the millionaire's tax again because I think that is very important to talk about it. And quickly, and I will on Friday talk more about what the governor, the candidates, and everybody is doing. This week, the legislature is working on some deadlines because they have to. It's a scheduled deadline for both the House and the Senate to pass bills out of their original chamber. Most committees are meeting daily to finalize the bill language before the third reading deadline. So that's important. And Friday, I'm going to tell you exactly what the bills are that they're pushing forward. You know, some of them, one of them is to fund the schools. The other one is they're looking at that millionaire's tax, which they're not passing that as a bill. They're trying to amend the Constitution on that and put that out there. Because once something is part of the Illinois Constitution, it's harder to get rid of it. So that's why they have the process of putting it before voters and hoping that voters will just vote for it because it looks like that they won't be paying it. And the percentages they're banking on is that most people will think that they don't have to pay it. Now, here's a question for you to kind of end on. Why won't they use that level of effort to get rid of property taxes or to at least take them down? They haven't done anything about that, or to repeal the income tax for the reasons that I said before, that people are getting 2, 3, 4 different taxes in this state. And nothing in the state costs less now than 7 years ago. And as a matter of fact, since 7 years ago, everything has gone up. Nothing is frozen. And the priorities of the supermajority of Democrats is not getting rid of taxes. It's taxing other people or adding another cost tax to other people. This is Just Listen Live, hosted by George. Let me know what you think. And it's always great to talk to everyone. Please subscribe. I've also made it as brief as possible. And I hope, especially young people, You need to vote in the election, and you need to look at how much you're paying in property taxes, grocery taxes, and all of that stuff, and look at who is going to work to change that or at least become a buffer. So have a great day, and I will talk to you on Friday.